I wanted to tell you a quick video about a guy by the name of Jim. Jim was a 15-year-old kid. He had figured out how to order pamphlets for men. This is back in older 1960s. Pamphlets for men, jewelry for women. Go door to door selling it. And he did an okay job, right? So the pamphlets were just little motivational quotes and funny stories that men would find interesting, and they could share with their friends that their friends hadn't heard it. And Jim would go door to door, sell these. If the man was there, he would tell the wife about what the man and why he would love these pamphlets, and he would even tell him, like, I'm not going to sell the same pamphlet very many times in the same town. That way this guy's friends won't even hear it. I go town to town. And so he had a good deal as far as how he sold it and made money. But he still struggled the first 2 weeks. He figured out that the women that were buying the jewelry were doing so just to help him out. They weren't really interested in it. And the men that were buying were doing it so just to help him out because they weren't as interested as really doing it. And so in all of that, Jim started tracking everything. He started figuring out that, hey, if the mailbox was up, if the little, they had outgoing mail, they were more responsive to me knocking on the door. And so he started only knocking on, he would just walk down through there, and if they had outgoing mail, he knocked on the door, and if they didn't, he didn't waste his time going door to door to door to door. He had figured out a process, right? He figured out that if they had a lot of grass and they took care of it, that they were a more responsive house, or whatever. All of his he started tracking everything. He was a data king, right? Data makes it all better. And so he built up that summer, had all this data figured out. The next summer came around, and he hired him a couple of people, put them on salary, and figured, hey, I can pay these guys $5 an hour. And if they sell the way that I can sell, and I can teach them, then they're going to make me about $15 an hour, and I'll clear $10 per hour for each guy that's out there. So I'll just try with these two, and then we'll go. And they figured out that once they got on salary, they didn't care what his data had told him or how hard he had tried or what he was saying or how he was saying it. They were just there to earn the $5 and go home. They were not trying to make him more money or push harder because he had given them a job, which he didn't understand. He thought he was doing them a great service. Instead of having to work at the local mill or wherever, he had actually helped them by giving them this amazing job. And so he was upset there, but he decided, okay, I'll hire me 2 commission salespeople. They'll be hungry. And the problem became that as the commission salespeople went out, they were a little too hungry. They seemed desperate. They wouldn't listen to advice. They were a little all over the place. And some of it he realized was just he had to find better talent. And so he developed a process for hiring people next. And so as he was doing his process for hiring people, he found him a couple of people, and they started working out great. I don't know. They started working out great. And so as they were working out great, he figured out that there was a mixture of a salary and a commission needed. He figured out that he should hire a team to hit each city. That way they could run contests, etc. He figured out everything. Man, I'm drawing terrible today, as if you couldn't tell. I always draw terrible all the time. So he figured out everything to do with hiring, and he figured it out fast. And then he looked up, and the next summer was coming up, and he was excited because he knew which houses to hit. He knew what mattered. He had him a team of people ready to go. He had hired the summer before, some of them returning, some of them not returning, but it didn't matter. He had figured out hiring over and over and over. He was the man when it came to selling these little nooks and knacks and crannies, or whatever you want to call them. Knickknacks, paddywhacks, junk and trash, trinket and trash shows, right? So he was the man. He had better suppliers now. He had multiple products. He had candle lines and books and pamphlets and jewelry and little hair berets and Scrabble jewelry and flowers that were from other countries that you could plant. And he could actually flip through the magazine and order them a month in advance and them direct delivery, He had all kinds of things going his way, and he was making a large amount of money. His per hour per person, he was making about $25 per hour per guy working. And he was able to hire more and more as he had developed a system for hiring people, keeping him on payroll, what doors, training, management, sales, etc. And it was his 18th birthday there in June that he realized he had a decision to make. Does he run the business and keep going? Or does he go to college? And it was a tough decision to make, but he went to college because he talked to his father and his mother, and they said that if the business was really that great, he could come back to it. And if it wasn't that great by the time he got through with college, no big deal. The problem became that as he went to college, the need was there. He had uncovered that need, and another little boy at the age of 15 had figured out his plan. He didn't know all of the data. He didn't know the system that Jim had run, but Bob, the new 15-year-old lad, had walked in and found the salespeople that he was talking to and picked their brain, picked them apart, figured out what they were doing, figured out where they were getting their products from, figured out which ones had the only thing he looked at was profit, and he figured out which one had the highest profit. And young Bob at 15 years old took over, quote unquote, the company that poor Jim left behind. Even though he didn't know he left the company behind, it was gone. And Bob proceeded to run that completely in the ground and break it off. See, there was a problem. And the problem is that while it was Jim was very analytical and understood the data and looked at it. And it was all great. But when it became Bob, I never did even finish the J, did I? When it became Bob, he only looked at one number. And that was, how much does it make? He didn't care. He didn't understand business. He was 15, 16 years old. And so he did things that made people leave him because he wasn't paying them on time or correct. He would bargain them out of commissions. He would go behind them and make extra sales to their customers, quote unquote, delivering goods. And that was one of their big things, right? So as Jim had trained them, you just get a small yes, and then as you come back to deliver the goods, if you didn't have them on you, and most of the time you didn't want to have them on you right that second, when you were coming back to deliver the goods, you could actually make another small upsell. And if you timed it right, you could sell the lady on a small little $1 thing of jewelry and tell her you'll be back that afternoon to make sure you're going to go polish it and make it all look great, as well as it'll be your final rounds. What time was she expected to be home that night? And when you came back that night, there would be the husband there, and you could sell him 3 times what you sold the wife in jewelry. And now that the husband's there, he can look at the other things that you're wanting to sell, encyclopedias or whatever they may be. And they had a pretty good little routine figured out. Remember, Bob had just taken up and listened to Jim, but sometimes didn't. Whether the flag was up or not didn't matter to him. But the case is that Jim had a business that had made a lot of money and a lot of people and helped them. He had helped employ people. He had helped the customers because they got what they wanted, even though sometimes they didn't even know they wanted it till they saw it. Bob had come in and just run it in the ground by only looking at money. And that's where this story heads off. That's the end of it. There's no big outcome or big ending, but I wanted to talk to you today about, are you going to be Jim or Bob? See, Jim, while he may not have grown something into huge, wildly famous status, he had helped several people and done good service, and he did it for the right reasons. It was entertaining to him. He found it interesting. And see, if you take on the approach of Jim today and you do it online, you don't have to hire salespeople, Every time you figure out the script that you should be using, it is in a funnel. It is on a sales page. Every time you find the right houses to hit, that is traffic. And those that are already interested and have their flag up are probably in a niche group of some type. Or maybe they're on Facebook and you know the target audience you should use there. And if you can understand the data of where the people are at, what they want, how they want to buy it, the delivery terms they want it on, then you can actually go to college working very little after you have the business established and be happy and grow at your own pace. Now, I'm not claiming to be able to tell you exactly how to do everything I just described. While I can tell you how to do it, what I'm trying to say is that there's a level of effort that you have to be a Jim. I cannot help a Bob. And some of that is just the unknowns. Jim works a little harder, looks at things a little differently, doesn't make excuses, just comes up and keeps trying at the next thing, whereas Bob is looking out for himself first and trying to take advantage. And so while I'm saying no matter how good I am or how much information you find on the internet, to some degree you just have to be a Jim, not a Bob. And that is the hardest thing to understand. It's also sometimes the hardest thing to break if you were raised up a certain way, because you may have been brought up to be a Bob. Your parents wanted you to be a Bob because they were a Jim and felt like they got walked on. So they wanted you to be a Bob. And remember, Jim had other people that he could hire. He could build a team. And they all got along, and he was able to pay them, and they worked for him. And this dude had a broken leg, apparently. And so Jim and his team, I got bad fast, and Bob and his money. And it's about being selfless. It's about looking out for others and more people than yourself. It's about looking out for them first and thinking of your customers first. It's about thinking about the bigger picture and not needing to move fast and not being desperate. But I understand we all have money crises. Lots of money problems. Everybody does. You either have money problems or you don't. And while you have money problems, it's the most pressure straining thing in the world. And when you don't, it just changes life. And so a lot of people that are here, that is the pivot they're wanting to make. They're wanting to make where when they wake up, the bills are paid. And I can appreciate that more than you can ever know. But regardless of where you're at today, you're not going to pay more bills because you're a Bob. You're not going to get more of this dollar bills, y'all, by chasing it. When you do the right things and you set up a business correctly and you have a market that you can tap into and a service that works and you figure out the data and you understand your audience and you do the right things, money just flows. See, money's out there. Money's being exchanged at all times. You're not creating money. And so I wanted to kind of open up everything just so we understand you are going to have to sell something. You're going to have to look at the analytical portion. You're going to have to give it time to build. But the main thing you're going to have to know is your audience, your people, better than anyone else. And as long as you can take on that role, you'll go places. And that requires being selfless, learning to ask, and thinking highly and higher of others than yourself. So we're going to be a Jim from this point on. If you want to be a Bob, this is probably not your route. Look forward to working with you. Good luck. And welcome to How Content Works.